Hi, my name is Leah, and I'm 22 years old. You might be wondering how a girl my age ends up living with her uncle, especially in the kind of situation I'm about to tell you. But trust me, this is something I never expected either. I'm studying to become a graphic designer, so I spend most of my time drawing, designing, and doing freelance work. Life hasn't always been easy for me. After my parents' divorce when I was younger, I moved around a lot, trying to figure things out. Eventually, I ended up here, living with my uncle, Jonathan. It wasn't planned. It all happened when my mom had to move away for work, and I needed somewhere to stay while I finished college. Jonathan, my uncle, was the only family member who could take me in. He's been married to his wife, Beatrice, for a few years now. They have a nice house out in the countryside, far from the city. I guess I thought it would be just like any other move, living in a quiet, peaceful place for a while. But, well, things turned out differently than I imagined. That brings me to today. It's been a few months since I moved in, and I've gotten used to this house, the routine, and the peacefulness here. Or at least I thought I had. But today is different. I'm sitting here writing this because something happened. Something that started when I walked into Jonathan's room while he was sleeping. Before I tell you what happened, make sure to hit that subscribe button on the channel so you don't miss any of the details of what comes next. To start, I should probably tell you a little more about Jonathan. Uncle Jonathan isn't like most uncles. He's always been more of a mentor to me than just a family figure. Growing up, he was the one who taught me how to ride a bike, fix things around the house, and even gave me my first car when I turned 18. So, when my mom needed a place for me to stay while she was off on business, he was the obvious choice. He's not your typical fun uncle who just shows up at holidays. Jonathan is thoughtful, patient, and incredibly kind. But it wasn't just him that I was moving in with. His wife Beatrice had been in the picture for a while now. They got married 2 years ago, and I wasn't really sure about her at first. She's older than Jonathan, and there's this subtle coldness about her that always kept me at arm's length. She never made me feel entirely welcome, like I was the outsider in their little world. At first, I stayed in the guest room, which was at the far end of the house. I tried not to disturb them much, giving them their space. But slowly, the awkwardness between Beatrice and me started to fade, especially when she began giving me some tips on cooking, cleaning, and the usual household stuff. I didn't exactly get along with her like I did with Jonathan, but at least it wasn't as tense anymore. It felt like life was returning to normal. At least I thought so. Over the past few months, I've grown closer to Jonathan. There's something comforting about his presence. The way he listens without judgment, how he's always willing to help with anything. We spend a lot of time together, especially in the evenings, talking over dinner or just relaxing in the living room. But lately, I've noticed something else. Something that I can't quite explain. It started as just a fleeting feeling, but the more time we spent together, the more I realized it, I was starting to feel drawn to him in a way I shouldn't. The way he would smile at me, his hand brushing against mine sometimes, the little glances he would throw my way when he thought I wasn't looking. It was all different than before. It's hard to describe, but I couldn't ignore it. I wasn't sure if he noticed, but I started feeling like there was a tension building between us, a kind of energy I couldn't escape. Now I'm sure you're thinking, Leah, what are you talking about? He's your uncle. And I know. It sounds crazy, but this feeling, this pull between us, it's undeniable. I try to push it away, telling myself that it's just my imagination running wild. But every time we're alone together, it feels like the air gets thicker, like there's an invisible thread pulling us closer. This brings me to today. After dinner, I was working on a project in my room when I heard footsteps in the hall. Jonathan had been napping for hours, and Beatrice wasn't home. She had gone out with friends, leaving us alone for the evening. At first, I didn't think anything of it. But then I heard the door to his bedroom creak open, and I froze. There was a moment of hesitation on my part. I didn't know if I should go in or just leave him to rest. But I was curious. I wanted to see him, talk to him. Maybe it was that unspoken tension that pulled me toward him. I pushed the door open quietly, trying not to disturb him. He was lying there, still in his usual position. On his back, one arm behind his head, his face relaxed in sleep. The soft light from the window cast shadows across his features, making him look peaceful, almost untouchable. I stood there for a few moments, my heart racing. I could feel the rush of blood in my ears, the heat rising in my cheeks. I had never felt like this before. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. Maybe just to look at him, or maybe I wanted something more. I don't know how long I stood there, but my thoughts were interrupted when I accidentally knocked a small vase off the shelf by his bed. The sound made Jonathan stir. His eyes fluttered open, and for a brief second, our gazes locked. I could see the confusion in his eyes, but there was something else there too, something I couldn't quite place. He blinked a couple of times, trying to focus on me, and then let out a low, groggy laugh. "Flea? What are you doing in here?" he asked, his voice still thick with sleep. I could feel my heart thudding in my chest as I struggled to come up with a response. I didn't want to seem like I was snooping, but I also didn't know how to explain what I was doing here. My mouth felt dry, and I couldn't find the words. I didn't mean to wake you," I stammered, suddenly feeling embarrassed. Jonathan sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. He looked at me with a kind smile, the kind he always wore when he was being patient with me. But there was something different in his eyes today, something that made my pulse quicken. He seemed to study me for a moment before speaking again. "It's okay," he said, his tone softer than usual. "You know you can always come to talk to me, Leah. I'm here for you." I nodded, but my thoughts were swirling. I didn't know how to handle this feeling inside me. The air in the room felt heavy, and I could feel my breath coming faster. "I just wanted to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan's smile faded a little, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a hesitation maybe. But it was gone in an instant. He patted the space next to him on the bed, gesturing for me to sit down. "Come here, then. You can always talk to me," he said again, his voice warm and inviting. I stood there for a second, unsure of what to do. But something inside me pushed me forward, and before I could think, I moved closer, sitting down beside him. The tension between us was palpable now, thicker than ever. I could feel the heat from his body next to mine, and the subtle scent of his cologne seemed to fill the air. We were so close that I could hear his breathing, feel the rise and fall of his chest with each breath. My heart was racing again. And then, as if in slow motion, I looked up at him, our faces so close now that I could feel his warmth. His gaze was soft, almost uncertain, but there was something else there too, something that made my skin prickle. "Leah, are you okay?" Jonathan asked, his voice low. Before I could answer, my lips. They parted, and without thinking, I found myself inching closer to him. I could feel the blood rushing to my face, and my heartbeat seemed impossibly loud in my ears. What was I doing? What was happening between us? I couldn't explain it, but everything felt so intense, so overwhelming, like the air around us was charged with something undeniable. Jonathan didn't move away, his eyes searching mine with a quiet intensity that mirrored the storm inside me. He didn't say anything more, but I could feel his breath coming faster, just like mine. The room felt warmer now, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. My thoughts were a jumble. Everything had led to this moment, this unpredictable, inexplicable moment. I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, I leaned in, my lips trembling as they brushed against his. It was tentative at first, a question, a hesitation. But as his lips responded, soft and gentle against mine, the floodgates opened. My mind screamed at me to pull away, but my body refused. I needed this. I wanted this. I couldn't deny it anymore. Jonathan's hand, warm and steady, found its way to my cheek, cupping it softly, urging me closer. His other hand rested on the bed beside him, fingers lightly grazing my skin. I could feel the heat of his touch, the way his palm made my skin burn. The kiss deepened, and I couldn't tell where his lips ended and mine began. Everything outside of this room ceased to exist. It was just the two of us, tangled in this undeniable connection. My mind spun with confusion, guilt, and an overwhelming sense of rightness. What were we doing? Why did it feel so necessary? There were no words to explain it. No logical reasoning behind the emotions coursing through me. He broke the kiss, just for a moment, his forehead resting gently against mine. Our breathing was heavy now, each inhale shaky, each exhale slow and deliberate. I could feel his pulse against my skin, and it mirrored the erratic rhythm of my own heart. Leah, his voice was soft, strained with something more. We shouldn't. But I wasn't sure I agreed. Something inside me refused to acknowledge any reason to stop. Slowly, I reached for his hand, threading my fingers through his. He didn't pull away, his fingers curling around mine as if he was holding on to me as much as I was holding on to him. Our eyes met again, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of everything hung between us, the unspoken questions still hanging in the air. Should we? Could we? My hand moved instinctively to the back of his neck, pulling him back to me, kissing him again. This time, there was no hesitation. There was no fear, no uncertainty. Just the raw need to be close to him, to feel him. Jonathan's hand slid down my back, pulling me closer, the contact of our bodies making everything feel impossibly intense. I didn't know where we were going, but I didn't care. There was only the moment, only the desire to stay in this space where nothing existed except for us. My heart raced faster, pounding against my chest as his lips moved to my neck, pressing soft kisses against my skin. I could feel his breath against my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. It was like nothing I had ever felt before. Intimate, consuming, and deeply wrong in the best way. You're sure about this? He murmured against my skin, his voice thick with desire. I don't want to hurt you. I closed my eyes, trying to find my voice. Everything inside me screamed to stop, to pull away, but I couldn't. The longing was too much. The need was too strong. I didn't want to think anymore. I didn't want to reason it out. I just wanted to be with him. I'm sure, I whispered, my hands moving over his chest, feeling the heat of his skin beneath my fingertips. I want this, Jonathan. I want you. His lips found mine again, and this time, the kiss was deeper, more urgent. There was no going back now. The world outside of this room didn't matter. There was only the way he made me feel. Desired, needed, alive in a way I had never felt before. The room seemed to close in around us, the light dimming as the intensity of our connection grew. Every touch, every kiss, felt like a promise. Of something more, something we couldn't explain but were both so willing to explore. I could feel his heartbeat, steady and sure, matching the rhythm of mine. And though part of me still fought against the reality of what was happening, a much larger part of me surrendered completely. I wasn't just kissing him anymore. It was more than that. It was a connection I couldn't describe, a bond that went beyond words, beyond explanations. I've wanted this for so long, Jonathan said softly, his breath hot against my lips. I could barely comprehend his words as my hands roamed over him, feeling the muscles in his chest, the heat of his skin, the way he responded to me. But there was no turning back now. There was only the pull between us, the way we seemed drawn to each other in a way neither of us had ever expected. Time seemed to stand still as we lost ourselves in each other, in the quiet rhythm of our kisses, the warmth of our touches. And for the first time, everything felt right. In the quiet stillness of the room, we were no longer uncle and niece. We were just two people, connected by something deeper, something far more intense than anything I had ever known before. The air between Jonathan and I hung thick with tension, neither of us moving, neither of us speaking. The silence was suddenly shattered by the sound of the front door opening downstairs. Both of us froze. My heart raced in my chest, and I quickly pulled away from Jonathan, panic seizing me. What had we just done? What was happening between us? The guilt washed over me, but it was mingled with something else, a desire that I couldn't ignore. I could feel the weight of it, the push and pull between what we had just shared and the reality that we were so deeply entangled in something we couldn't easily untangle. Jonathan didn't move immediately. His gaze was fixed on me, but his expression was unreadable. I could feel the heat between us, the lingering closeness that hadn't yet dissipated. "Leah," he whispered, his voice strained. But before he could say anything more, the sound of footsteps echoed up the stairs. Jonathan, came a voice I instantly recognized. My heart dropped into my stomach. It was Beatrice. I quickly jumped off the bed, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I didn't know what to do. My mind raced in every direction, but I couldn't come up with an answer that would make sense. Was I really going to face her after what had just happened? The door to Jonathan's room creaked open, and there she was. Beatrice, standing in the doorway with a surprised look on her face. Her eyes flicked between Jonathan and me, confusion flickering across her features as she took in the scene. "Leah? Jonathan? What's going on here?" she asked, her voice laced with uncertainty, but there was something else too, an intuition perhaps that something was amiss. I could feel the blood drain from my face. Beatrice's presence was like a cold shower, and all at once, everything felt wrong. There was no way to explain this. No way to justify what had just happened between Jonathan and me. My throat felt tight, and I struggled to find my voice. I stammered, not sure what to say. Jonathan, sitting up on the bed now, his expression blank, seemed equally at a loss. His hand rubbed the back of his neck, clearly embarrassed, but not sure how to explain either. Beatrice's gaze shifted to him, then back to me. There was an unspoken understanding between us, something that neither of us was ready to confront. It was as though in that single moment, everything shifted. Beatrice knew something was happening, something that wasn't supposed to be. But her reaction was not what I expected. Instead of anger or disappointment, there was only a deep, unsettling sadness in her eyes. She walked into the room, closing the door behind her, her presence commanding the space. There was an odd stillness in the room now, like the calm before a storm. "Leah, you need to understand something," Beatrice said softly, her voice surprisingly gentle. "There's more to this than you realize. More than either of you understand." I looked at her, confusion flooding me. What did she mean? What more was there? His silence in the room felt heavier after Beatrice left. Her words had left an imprint on both of us, and while there was still so much confusion, her understanding and offer of guidance had given me something I hadn't expected: hope. Beatrice wasn't angry. She wasn't ready to cast us aside. She was giving us a chance that felt fragile and uncertain, but still there. I glanced at Jonathan, his face still a mixture of guilt, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite place. He was avoiding my gaze now, his hands nervously rubbing together. I knew he felt the weight of what had happened, the way our worlds had collided in the most unexpected and complicated way. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that none of this had been anyone's plan. Things had unfolded in a way that was beyond any of our control. The only thing I knew for certain was that we couldn't ignore it. We couldn't pretend like nothing had happened. Beatrice was right about that. The feelings, the confusion. It all had to be addressed, and it had to be faced. There was no running from it. "Jonathan," I whispered, my voice shaking slightly. "What do we do now?" Jonathan looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of emotions. "I don't know, Leah. I don't know what to feel, what to think. I don't know if I should be angry or ashamed, or if I'm allowed to feel anything at all." His voice cracked with vulnerability, and I could hear the internal struggle in his words. He was a man torn between the deep connection we'd shared and the loyalty he had to Beatrice, his wife. My aunt. This was the kind of situation that couldn't just be sorted out in one conversation. It wasn't that simple. I took a deep breath and walked toward him, the space between us closing slowly. I wanted to reach out to him, to hold him, but I didn't know if that was the right thing to do. I didn't know what was right anymore. "I don't think we're going to figure everything out right now," I said softly. "But I think we need to talk. To be honest with each other. This is too complicated to ignore." Jonathan nodded slowly, his face serious, but not angry. "Yeah, I know. I just don't know where to even start." I took a step closer, my heart racing, but my voice steady. "We start by admitting what happened. What we felt. What we still feel. And then we figure out what comes next." He nodded again, his expression softening just a little. "It's not going to be easy, Leah. But I want to understand. I want to understand what's happening between us. I took his hand, the contact both comforting and charged with unspoken emotion. I don't have all the answers, Jonathan. I don't know what happens next, but I'm not running from this. Not anymore. We sat in the silence for a moment, each of us lost in our own thoughts, trying to process the overwhelming complexity of the situation. There was no clear path forward, no map to guide us through the maze of emotions, guilt, and confusion. But what Beatrice had offered us was something that felt like a lifeline, the freedom to face this together, to confront the messy, tangled web of feelings that had caught us in its grip. I looked at Jonathan again, his eyes meeting mine, and in that moment I knew that whatever came next, we would face it with honesty. There was no perfect answer, no easy fix. But there was a chance for healing, for understanding, and maybe, just maybe, something more. As I leaned back, my mind racing with possibilities, I couldn't help but think of Beatrice. What she had said, her calm maternal guidance, had opened a door that I hadn't known existed. She hadn't rejected us. She hadn't condemned us. Instead, she'd given us room to breathe, to work through the complexities of what had happened. But what would happen next? What would Beatrice say if we told her how deeply we still felt? Would it be too much? Would she ever truly forgive us? But those were questions for another time. Right now, it was just Jonathan and me, sitting in the silence of our shared uncertainty, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. The only thing we could do was take the next step, whatever that might be. And somehow, together, we would figure it out.